outside, you can never quite guess on the weather. You know. We do have jackets for the people here because it's a little cooler than we thought it was going to, but hopefully it's still good. Anyways, we're thrilled to have you here tonight. Hopefully it's still good. Put flyers on your seat. The wind was blowing. The wind was a little harder earlier. You have information about our Christmas in July, which is coming up next week. So put that on your calendar next week. So it's fun. We'll be doing pumpkin pie and hot toddies and you never know, Santa might stop by. We have our gingerbread house. Never know, Santa might stop by. It's a fun competition for our staff. Gingerbread house. So they'll try and bribe you. Make sure they bribe you well before you vote. Make sure they bribe you. One's the best one. Tonight we are thrilled to have the history of Grand Lake and old inns. I think that's something that everybody here seems to be interested in. I'll give her a little promo because she's got her book with her, and I hope that you haven't read it after tonight. You're going to want to get a copy, and so we have those available as well tonight. So, Mary Beth, with no
Thank you.
further ado.
Thank you.
Yay!
Well, I am just going to take you tour back in time to Grand Lake in the 1940s and 1950s. Have you all been to Grand Lake? Yeah. Has anyone not been to Grand Lake? Okay. Then you know how beautiful it is. It's a glacier-created lake. It's a very deep lake. It was a very beautiful, pure lake until the Colorado Big Thompson project that we'll talk about a little bit. But the reason I chose this picture is that there's an Indian legend. The Utes were camping on the shores of Grand Lake years and years ago, and they were raided by Cheyennes and Arapahoes very suddenly. Hi, thanks for joining us. And they put all of their women and children on rafts and sent them out in the middle of the lake to protect them during the battle. A storm came up, capsized the rafts, all the women and children drowned. And so when on the lake in the morning, these are the spirits of the dead Indians in the bottom of Grand Lake, and it said that the Utes never returned to the shores of Grand Lake. They would not come back, but this is part of the mystery. It's kind of in fact, one of the original names for Grand Lake was Spirit Lake. So now the village of Grand Lake started out as a supply town for miners in mines up in what is now Rocky Mountain National Park. And when the mines played out, which happened pretty quickly, they weren't stupid around there. They thought tourism is what we need to capitalize on. You know, tourism is going to be our thing. So people started camping with family camping in big tents and eventually building cabins. And my inspiration for loving the place was my grandparents, and they started going up in 1929. They had come to Estes on vacation, and my grandfather loved to fly fish. And someone said to him, well, you need to go to Grand Lake. And so they went over Fall River Road and drove to Grand Lake in 1929, and that was it. Vacation there forever after, and that's how I grew up, going on vacation to Grand Lake. So my grandmother is holding a fish with its head cut off, and I don't know whether there's a story, whether he always agreed to do that for her or what the story is behind the picture, but she's holding the fish and he's holding the rod. And they lived in Topeka, Kansas. And a lot of the tourism in the early days was Oklahomans, Texans, and Kansans. Still, that's the case. Places you escape, particularly in August. You just get out of there. A lot of you maybe are from those places. Nebraska. So anyway, we would make that drive from Topeka in the summer. Now, what was Grand Lake like in the 40s and 50s? Project, a huge water diversion project that brought water under mountains in Rocky Mountain National Park down into this area and on to Greeley, Fort Morgan, those areas to irrigate crops. And they flooded what is now Shadow Reservoir as part of the Colorado project. And it just so happens that immediately the part of this house that's over the rock is the oldest existing cabin on Grand Lake. And is that the proverbial house built on the rock or what? Because it's lasted, and its old chimney on the side has lasted. Isn't that pretty? There's no road. Yes. You know a lot about Grand Lake. Yes. The real estate on Grand Lake is very limited because, well, number one, it's not a huge lake. Number two, behind the first row of houses on the south shore and the east shore, it's Rocky Mountain National Park, so you can't build there. A lot of the sites are unbuildable. They're steep and rocky. You don't have sewer, you don't have water. And you don't have road. In a lot of cases, some of these houses were built without a road to get to them. They still don't have a road. This is a modern picture of an old cabin built by the composer John Thompson. Now, some of you may have taken piano lessons as a child in the John Thompson piano books. There were red ones, brown ones, different colors. And he had a piano studio in the back. And I will never forget, I was probably 8 years old. My grandfather was a friend of his, and my grandfather took me to play the piano for him. One of the most horrid experiences. I wasn't good, and it was summer, and I hadn't been practicing, and here I'm supposed to play for this man that I know that wrote these piano books. And it was terrible. It was really terrible. But this cabin is a good example of the typical architecture around Grand Lake, which is bark slab. And you've got the bark slab on there, and you don't have to paint it except for the trim. And that's the way the old houses were built. Another thing this shows is the flags on the flagpole. It's a tradition on Grand Lake that if you are in residence, you have your flag up. You have the American flag up, and under it you have your state flag. And it's really fun to go around and see who's from what state around the lake, and then you also know whether they're there or not. Because if they're there, they have their flag up. Now, John Thompson, besides being a composer, was quite an amateur photographer. And I have a couple of his photographs here. One of them is of John Thompson bringing his Chris craft into the boathouse. And these two women, the middle one is his daughter-in-law, and the other one is a neighbor. And what I love about this picture is that on Grand Lake in a Chris craft, you're seen. You know, I mean, look how they're sitting up on the, you know, they're not sitting down in the seat. They want to be seen on the lake. And it's nice to be seen in one of these beautiful Chris crafts. And there are many of these still on Grand Lake. And they can survive because of the boathouses when they, the Colorado Big Thompson project, they kept Grand Lake at a constant level now. And so you have these boathouses on the water and the wooden boats in them, and in the winter, you know, they hoist them up on chains inside the boathouse, so they're able to keep these beautiful wooden boats. Yes?
Grand Lake was not constant level before?
No, it wasn't. It was a, you know, stream-fed lake, largest lake in Colorado, which isn't saying a whole lot for this natural lake, the largest natural lake in Colorado.
The deepest too, isn't it?
Yes, it's 265 feet deep at its deepest, very deep, very cold too. And we'll get back to the deep part. There's a little story about that. Okay, this is my other picture from John Thompson. He took this portrait of the maid from a summer home a couple of doors down from theirs. Now, these large summer homes, people of means would bring their maids with them for the summer, you know, to do the cooking. They had lots of company, you know, have the parties for them, clean up and everything. And there was quite a subculture of these maids in Grand Lake. They were well respected in the town. And they had their own little social community. Of course, they'd play cards or whatever when they had time off. And I saw this portrait. This woman's name was Alma. I never met her, but I love this picture. And I wrote a novel set in Grand Lake in 1947. And really, this portrait was an inspiration for me. I thought, I want her to be my main character. I wonder what life is like for her.
Hold it still. Thank you.
Okay. But at the end of the day, she intimidated me because I thought, what do I really know about what her life was like in Grand Lake in the 1940s? You know, but she's one of my characters in my book, and I decided to use as a main character an 11-year-old little girl who's there with her grandparents, and Alma is supposed to be taking care of her. And shh.
Whiskey.
Oh, thank you for asking. It's Johnny Walker, Black Label, and the caption below the portrait was "Good Spirits." And look at the size of her hands. She just is amazing to me. But anyway, so I decided to use this 11-year-old Nancy Drew wannabe. And this little girl is there for the summer with her grandparents and the maid Alma. And she's so bored, she has to create a mystery and solve it. And so she solves the mystery of the missing squash blossom necklace. But anyway, I had fun. I went on eBay and got the original Nancy Drew books that a little girl of 11 would have been reading in the 1940s, you know, because they go back, I've forgotten how long, but a little farther than that. Now, this is the Mallow Mansion. In its day, the largest house on the lake. I don't know whether it's ever been surpassed. There is one that's maybe almost that big now. 11 bathrooms and 23 bedrooms in this house. And of course, a full staff of servants, lots of parties. And in the 40s, a group of investors bought this from the Mallow family, and they were going to make it a hunting lodge, which seems a little weird to me. But anyway, they were going to do that. They had financial trouble, took out a large insurance policy, and this burned to the ground in 1963. And we knew a man in Grand Lake named Clyde Eslick, who was caretaker for a summer home that my family used to own. And he said that he was by this house the day that it burned, and he smelled gasoline around it. Just saying. But the only thing that was left, in this picture you see over on the far left this stone kind of a patio area, and there's also a large chimney right there. That's all that was left of this house, and now it is owned by a man named Larry Broderick. Same boathouse. There's the little patio and the chimney. He's made a barbecue pit out of what was left of the Mallow Mansion.
Where on the lake was it?
That is on the town shore. Oh, it's a ways east of town. There's, if you go east toward Baldy along the town shore, there's a cove you go into where the Buttram houses are. I don't know where they, well, anyway, it's on a little bit. It's on the town shore, but toward Baldy from town. Now, this is a hall cabin, and it looks exactly like I remember it as a child. I don't think anything is particularly changed about it. And it is on the south shore. There is no road to it still. When they built it, they brought all the materials over in the winter across the ice on wagons. And there is a story that one of the Hall automobiles is down in the lake, you know, had gone through the ice. But this is in the area where it is the deepest. I mean, there's no beach around there. There are these rocks, and then you're going down. And there was I'm not sure of the time period, probably about the 1930s. The next house down the shore, which is quite a ways down, the Adams house, the Adams had a little boy who's about 5 years old, and his parents were going to Denver to buy some supplies to have a party, and he begged them. He said, "Can't I go with you?" "No, you need to stay here." And he and a little servant boy went fishing. They both were drowned off of close to here. They never found the bodies. And in those days, before the Colorado Big Thompson project, you know, they sent a light bulb down in a you know, bottle or something. They could see way, 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 way down into the lake, but they never found these little boys. Oh, no, there's more about this. Okay, the halls. Oh gosh, what's Mr. Hall's name? Mr. Hall was a good friend of Winston Churchill's. And after World War II, Winston Churchill needed to make some money. Winston Churchill had financial problems all the way along. He wasn't the best with his money, let's just say. So Mr. Hall said, "I tell you what, you paint original design," because Winston Churchill was a painter. That was his hobby. "You paint me designs for Hallmark cards and I will pay you for them." And I have heard from a man up there who knew Mr. Hall that on the second floor of this house are those original paintings from Winston Churchill. And I would love to actually I'd love to get in the house and see for myself. But it's fun to think that that might be true. And it still is owned by Hall relatives. Now, this house, this is the Coogler house, and the very center part of it is very old. You can see back in there, and they've built out around it. Coogler, K-U-G-L-E-R. But the reason I made a copy of this picture is that Mr. Coogler, back in the day, and a friend of his would come over for cocktails, and the previous owner had been a theatrical person, and he had left mannequins and costumes in the bottom of this cabin. And so Mr. Coogler and his friend, and there was a big tourist boat called the Showboat that they used to take tourists around, a great big boat. And so Mr. Coogler and his friend would plan this. They would bring up a mannequin from the basement in a costume and bring it out on the deck and act as if they were strangling it and toss it over as the showboat went by with the tourists. Now, we have to talk about the Grand Lake Yacht Club. the Grand Lake Yacht Club, they still claim it is the world's highest registered yacht anchorage. I mean, who knows? They probably put that up in the 19-teens or, whenever the building was built. But the Grand Lake Yacht Club is quite a place. It was founded in 1902 by some Denver men, just a handful of men from Denver who had summer homes and started to sail up here. A couple of them just took rowboats and rigged sails on them. I mean, it was very primitive to begin with, but they'd race each other and have these competitions. And they decided, probably over cocktails. Cocktails figure pretty prominently in a lot of this. Decided we need a yacht club. So they formed the Grand Lake Yacht Club. That was in 1902. And in the building itself was built in the 19-teens, and it's just like it was, except for the addition of that third floor crow's nest up on the top. The rest of it is just a big rectangular building. It's kind of like a garage down below and then a big room up above where they have parties.
What part of the lake is that on?
That is on the town shore, so that'd be the North Shore. In fact, it's right adjoining the public beach.
Okay.
So, in 1912, the Irish yachtsman Sir Thomas Lipton was visiting in the United States, and he competed in the America's Cup races, and he would donate cups to yacht clubs. And so these guys from Denver said, do you think we could get one of those? So what they did, I mean, there were maybe 6 of them, and they sailed on this little lake in Grand Lake, and the boats were not much to look at. So they invited him to the University Club in Denver in December in 1912, and they entertained him and told him all about their wonderful races on Grand Lake, and he sent a Lipton Cup. And this thing, these are the cups that are awarded every year by the Grand Lake Yacht Club. Wow. And these, over the years, have been donated by families. Many of them are very, very old. They're for different classes of sailboats. Some of them are for motorboats. I mean, they have to think of things to award these. They have all this silver, and they have to give it to people somehow, But anyway, the Christmas stuff is because every year there's a theme for the regatta, and it was Christmas one year, so just kind of disregard all the Christmas stuff below the mantle. But that's what it looks like, and they have these elaborate bases under them because if you win it, then you engrave the name of your boat and your name and the year on the base. And so, over 100 years on some of these cups, the bases get bigger and bigger. They have to keep adding places to engrave the names. But the center cup here is the Lipton Cup. That is the big deal award for the e-scow races in the Grand Lake Yacht Club. And this thing, it used to be that the winner would just take it home for the year. And I've talked to people who've won it who were, it just made them so nervous. Where are we going to keep this thing? They'd hide it in closets or attics or whatever. And now it is stored in a vault in a bank in Denver. I mean, you don't take it home with you. Now you win it, and then, it goes away. But anyway, they really are beautiful. And these cups are awarded at the Commodore's Ball. The first week in August, it's a regatta. The sailboat races go every July weekend. Something's happening.
A bird up on the top of the tree is going away.
Okay. Every weekend in July, they have sailboat races. And then the first week in August is the regatta. Every day there's sailboat races, culminating in the Commodore's Ball on Saturday night. And boy, when I was a little girl, that was like being a princess and going to being Cinderella and going to a ball or something. They bring up a live band from Denver, and it's really a fun affair. And now they have, this is an e-scow from 1940. Now, right after World War II, the e-scow fleet really grew in Grand Lake because a number of the young men just back from the war, their daddies bought what they called trophy boats. And that's when this fleet really grew. in the 40s after the war. And these boats go very, very flat. These scows, they're flat, and they've got a lot of sail area for the size of the boat, and they tip over. It's very exciting. And I love this picture because it looks like the two women might have life jackets on. The guy doesn't even have a shirt on, much less a life jacket. I mean, it's just crazy. And back in, huh? It's cold. Oh, it's deep and it's cold. Now on the shallower shores, you know, I mean, it's kids. We swam, you know. Now they wear wetsuits, you know. But back in the day, you learned to sail these things by just you'd get on a boat as crew. You know, people are always looking for crew. And you just get on and they'd tell you what to do and you just learn to sail. And now they have a wonderful sailing school for children, and that, you know, they're actually taught how to sail. But back in the day, we just got on a boat. And my most vivid memory of crewing on a sailboat was tipping over, back over front on one of these e-scows. Now, I wasn't with the best sailor on the lake, I'll tell you that. And I don't remember how in the world he accomplished this, but we went over the back of the boat, went over, you know, the bow of it went under the water, and we went back over the boat. So.
Did you have a life jacket on?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anymore, yeah, it's required that you wear, and I'm sure I had one on. I'm sure my parents.
Race on Grand Lake,
Yeah.
not on show. I didn't realize it was long.
Grand Lake? Oh, yeah. It's 2 miles by 4 miles, 3 miles by 4 miles. And it can be wild, depending on the weather. It can be really wild. Okay. So, let me see here. Let me see what I missed that I just couldn't wait to tell you.
The boats, for those of us just wandering around, the boats are moored on the town side of the lake.
Well, no, the boats are moored by the family summer home on lifts. You know, they're up a little bit out of the water. Back in the day, we didn't have something like that, and so we'd have to scrub the. Okay, so my older brother, for the privilege of crewing for him, I would have to scrub the bottom of his boat. You know, so you'd pull the mast down, you'd pull the boat up and the mast down and stand on the shore and you'd scrub the bottom of the boat. And now they have lifts. But no, each boat would be by the home where the person is. The yacht club's on the North Shore. And so if a race was going on, you know, there might be several boats there in between times. But do you all have any questions about Grand Lake?
What was the population range of the town during those years?
You know what? I don't know back then. Now it's a few hundred. It's a few hundred. I've heard recently that the median age is 61 in Grand Lake, in the village of Grand Lake, which is small.
That's at present population?
Yeah.
A few hundred?
Yes. They lost their elementary school a few years ago. They didn't have the population to maintain an elementary school.
That's winter population or summer?
That's winter.
Okay,
Oh,
summer.
did you mean summer population?
Both.
Oh,
Both, yeah.
I don't know what the summer population is. Much bigger, and they depend on that summer economy. You know, it's just dead in the winter. Ice fishing, you know. I mean, but no skiing right around there or anything. Granby? I don't know. Granby has certainly grown in the last few years. They have a lot of development around, and it's kind of the service town for around there.
I mean, that's where most people in Grand County live.
Yeah, or Winter Park, or the Winter Park area.
Yeah, but Winter Park. Oh,
Yes.
how about the gunfight?
Oh, the gunfight. Yes, okay. I think it happened on July 4th. I might be wrong about that, but for some reason. And the county commissioners, there was a gunfight in a hotel on the lake shore, and a couple of the county commissioners and somebody else, three or four men were killed, and the guys got away, I believe. But it was there's a historical marker still where that happened.
All the Democrats on the board.
You think so?
What year was that?
That was, oh my, early, probably late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cemetery, they're all buried together. Oh, is there a cemetery?
Oh yes, there is a
Where is that
cemetery.
located?
Do you know where Columbine Lake is? Columbine Lake is on the road. But well, if you come out of the entrance to west side of Rocky Mountain National Park, you know Grand Lake is only, you know, a couple miles up the road. But between the entrance and Grand Lake, you go off to the west and the Columbine Lake areas around there, and the cemetery is kind of there off the road between the park and Grand Lake. And what I remember about it is so many children of right about the same year, so they had smallpox or something go through there that killed a number of children. There's also a woman who, and this would be in the late 1800s, her husband and oldest son were off doing something, and she had severe depression and killed her other 4 children and herself. And yeah, the Spider House. Was it? Mm-hmm.
Did the Holdsworths have any kind of relationship with the town?
Well, I'm sure they did. I mean, the Holdsworths had one of the large ranches in the valley, in the Kawanichi Valley, and I'm sure they did. You know, they had to sell out to the park, and most of that was destroyed, the buildings.
Golf course, when was that added to the?
The Grand Lake Golf Course, maybe the 60s?
You know, there's a Nessus Park Grand Lake Golf Tournament every summer.
Really?
Yeah.
And how does that usually go?
Well, they go 1 year there, the next year here, and they have a trophy goes
Oh,
back.
that's neat. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
Was the lodge, the Grand Lake Lodge?
The Grand Lake
Was
Lodge.
it very much a part of all this? Was it an
Yes and no. It was a step away. You know, the Grand Lake Lodge is up on the hill, and it's kind of its own, well, I suppose it's kind of like the Baldpate Inn. I mean, it's kind of its own entity. And so, you know, I remember it as a place you'd go for a nice dinner, but it's always been kind of separate. It is 100 years old this year, the Grand Lake Lodge, and still standing, not owned by the Jones family, but yeah, and they've kind of stumbled along since the James owned it. But yeah, the Grand Lake Lodge.
And there's the Grand Lake Theater Group, too.
Grand Lake Theater Group. Actually, the theater now is a big deal in Grand Lake. Very professional. Yeah.
Did you see, did people get in to see the Regatta at the beginning of August, or are the races still run like every Saturday in July?
Yes, every Saturday and Sunday in July. I mean, particularly if you had access to a boat, you could certainly go out and watch them. You could watch from the public beach shore, or if you had access, yes, certainly. You know, if you had access to the lake or to view things on the lake, you could watch those races. And I tell you what, they're beautiful to watch from Grand Lake Lodge. Yeah. You know, if you can dine on the porch of Grand Lake Lodge when those races are going on, they're beautiful to watch. Mm-hmm.
And if you call like information or something, can they give you times?
Times when the races are? They generally start at about 11 o'clock if there's wind. And as soon after about 11 that there is wind. You know, they're kind of a loosey-goosey 11 o'clock start, but we'll hold it if nothing's happening. And
They have a visitor center there.
they have a Chamber of Commerce.
But
The
I mean, for information?
well, the Yacht Club is
No,
not.
I mean just the whole town. Is there information?
Yes, there's a little booth
I think that's
in the
just as
center
you
of
come
town.
in.
Pardon me?
By the park.
Oh,
Yes. Uh-huh.
oh, that little thing.
By the community center or the Chamber of Commerce up on the, as you come down into town. Those, and you wouldn't get, the Yacht Club doesn't answer a phone or anything. I mean, you know, you wouldn't get information there But that's the deal. They generally start about 11 or.
They're off of Highway 34 or whatever, there's a building right there.
Yes.
That's the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes. You know, my family had a summer home from 1964 to 2018, and our story would be a very typical story. We finally sold it. I mean, the families get so big, and the places are expensive, and then you spend, or at least I did, my time figuring out who gets to stay there when and who has to do, you know. Yeah, I was the one. Who does what chores and who pays for what expenses, and it just becomes unwieldy, and so. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I think they have refreshments up here afterward. Over here. Thank you. You sound like you've spent a lot of time in Grand Lake. You sound like you've spent a lot of time in Grand Lake.
I've done some writing here too.
Really? Oh, I do. Oh, let me tell you about my book. Speaking of writing. Okay. So, my book, which they have up here, is Turquoise Summer. It's a novel set in Grand Lake in 1947. And it's about a newspaper editor from Kansas who brings his wife, Maid, and 11-year-old granddaughter for the summer. The story is completely a fiction, but I played a lot with the details of the time and the historical details, and had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun doing that. Oh yes, I have. Yes, I have Miller's Indian Village in it, and also 7 Keys of Baldpate Inn, the book, and the Baldpate Inn is also in the story. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're a nice group. Are you regulars? Do you all come out to all of these? Yeah, nice. Are you summer residents, year-round residents?
Seasonal.
Permanent?
Seasonal.
From where? Okay.
We wound up
Yeah.
going over to Grand Lake several times this summer. It's wonderful.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wrote a number of books. One was those cast.